Who would have imagined that a humble 78-year-old farmer would become the protagonist of a story that would bring an entire town to tears? When Don Mateo walked into a dealership to purchase a fleet of trucks, he was humiliated without mercy. But when he revealed his true motive, he left everyone speechless. In a quiet town nestled in the mountains, where time seemed to move slower, lived Don Mateo. At first glance, there was nothing extraordinary about him. He always wore his inseparable straw hat and a pair of worn-out boots that had seen better days. Yet, there was something in his slow but firm way of speaking that hinted at a depth unseen by most. One day, to everyone's surprise, Don Mateo gathered the townspeople in the central plaza. His voice trembled slightly, but there was a quiet determination that only years of experience could grant. He announced his decision to buy a fleet of trucks. The news hit like a lightning bolt on a clear day. What could an old, humble farmer possibly want with something so extravagant? Speculation ran wild. Laughter and murmurs of disbelief filled the air. That morning in the local grocery store, two neighbors whispered about the matter. "Have you heard? Don Mateo says he's going to buy trucks." "For what?" "He barely has enough to maintain his farm," one said, shaking his head while the other chuckled. But Don Mateo wasn't discouraged. In fact, there was a peculiar glint in his eyes, as if he enjoyed the confusion he had stirred. It was as if he were playing an invisible game of chess, moving pieces no one else could see. While many laughed at him, others began to wonder if there was more to his declaration than met the eye. What few knew was that Don Mateo spent his nights gazing at the sky from his porch, whispering words into the wind, as if speaking to an old friend. "They will understand, sooner or later," he would say with a faint smile. This elderly man, with his slow gait and carefree demeanor, was plotting something that would change the town forever. But the true impact of his dream had yet to be revealed. What seemed like the eccentric whim of an old man was about to reveal a purpose so profound that it would shake even the most skeptical souls. The day Don Mateo walked into the dealership, he did so as always. Unhurried, wearing his old hat, his steps measured and deliberate. The salesmen, dressed in impeccable suits, glanced at him sideways. One leaned toward his colleague and, in a whisper loud enough to be heard, scoffed, "What's this old man doing here? Probably just wants a brochure to daydream." Don Mateo heard the comment but didn't react. His gaze remained calm, as if he had all the time in the world. He approached the counter and, with his deep, steady voice, said, "I'm here to buy a fleet of trucks." Silence fell instantly. Then came the laughter. One of the salesmen, smirking, asked sarcastically, "And how many trucks do you need, sir?" 1, 2, maybe 10? The mockery was obvious, but Don Mateo, unbothered, simply replied, 10. Brand new, fully equipped. The dealership erupted in laughter. Employees exchanged incredulous glances. "Sure, sir, and I'm the president," one of them sneered. Don Mateo just watched, letting their laughter fade on its own. His silence was almost an act of defiance, saying more than words ever could. It felt as if this small old man was standing against a giant made of skepticism and disdain. But then, when they asked how he intended to pay, Don Mateo calmly pulled a crumpled check from his pocket. The amount written was enough to cover the entire purchase. The room fell into a stunned silence. The laughter died. The faces of the salesmen turned from amusement to sheer disbelief. "Is this real?" one of them murmured. Don Mateo said nothing, only nodded with a slight smile. The air in the room grew heavy. Those who had mocked him now seemed so small in the face of his quiet dignity. But one question still lingered. Why would this old man make such a grand purchase? The check lay on the counter, gleaming like an unexpected treasure. The salesmen, now perplexed, shifted their attitudes. Some tried to mask their shock with forced smiles, while others whispered among themselves, "Is this a joke? How could a man like him have this kind of money?" But Don Mateo remained silent, as if accustomed to being underestimated. He let the room speak for itself. His patience was unnerving, as if every moment was part of a carefully crafted plan. Finally, a young salesman, less burdened by prejudice than his colleagues, dared to ask, "Excuse me, sir, but why do you need so many trucks, if it's not too much to ask?" Don Mateo, his serene gaze unwavering, simply replied, "When the time comes, you will understand." His voice carried the weight of wisdom, leaving more questions than answers. That simple, enigmatic phrase echoed in the room like a lesson no one had expected. Though they wanted to press him further, something in his presence commanded respect. It was as if every word he spoke carried a depth they couldn't yet grasp. As the papers were signed, the employees avoided looking him in the eye, as if his presence forced them to confront their own doubts. Don Mateo, for his part, felt no need to justify himself. Life had taught him that truth doesn't always need immediate explanations. Sometimes silence and time are the best allies. Patience, he thought, is the art of those who know that everything has its moment. With the contract signed and the truck keys in his hands, Don Mateo paused at the dealership's entrance. The employees watched from inside, still unable to understand what had just happened. Then, one of them, unable to contain his curiosity, rushed outside and called after him. "Sir, please, we need to know. Why did you buy all these trucks? What are you going to do with them?" The young man's voice trembled, not from fear, but from a mix of respect and genuine intrigue. For the first time that day, Don Mateo stopped. He turned slowly, and what he said next left everyone breathless. "Many years ago," he began, "my son was just like you, young, full of dreams. He worked transporting goods for the families in our town. One night, while driving on those treacherous roads full of potholes and dangers, his truck overturned. He didn't survive." His voice broke for a moment, but he continued, speaking with a strength that seemed to come not from him, but from a greater purpose. "That night, I made a promise. No father in my town would ever again lose a child to those same roads. These trucks aren't for me, they're for them, for my people, to make sure no one else suffers the loss I did." A profound silence followed. No one dared to speak. Even those who had laughed at him earlier now found their eyes filled with tears. And in that moment, Don Mateo's dream was no longer just his own. It had become the heart of an entire town, beating with a newfound understanding of what true sacrifice and love meant.